talk about the TickScale widget from the TTK widgets library. First, we are going to see the example from the GitHub repository. Then we are going to see why use this widget. The example is in the examples folder in the TTK widgets repository. To install the library, pip install TTK widgets. So you go to the examples folder, then you go to the example TickScale file, and then you will find this code. The code is simple. It creates 3 TickScales, 2 horizontals and 2 horizontal TickScales and 1 vertical one, using 2 styles and using the theme clam. This is what you get when you run the example. So we have the vertical TickScale and the 2 horizontal ones. I'm moving the slider right now for the first TickScale, now the second one, and this is the third one. To create the TickScale, you simply import it from the TTK widgets library. Then you call TickScale. You specify the master, the orientation, vertical or horizontal. If you have a vertical, you want to use a style. The style, it must be composed with vertical TickScale. If you have an horizontal one, it must be composed with horizontal TickScale. From to minimum value, maximum value. Show value, whether or not to show the label beside the slider. For example, here I'm going to set it to false and run the code again and see what will happen. Here I am moving the slider and there is no indication on the current value. I set back the show value to true. You can also specify the digits, the number of the digits after the comma. For example, if I use 1, you can see here the number of digits changed. Label pose for the position of the label. If show label is equal to true, it is equal to true by default. So here it's equal to E for east. I'm going to try W west. You can see that the position of the label changed. I will set it to north. Here the label is positioned above the slider. Now S for south. You can see here the label position is to the south. If I set it to the north again to see when I move the slider what will happen. So it doesn't move with the slider, maybe because we are using a vertical TickScale. I'm going to try the label position or label pose with an horizontal scale, the second one. You can see here the label moves with the slider, but if I set it to east or W for west, we are going to test with west. You can see here that the label position doesn't move. I will set back the lateral position to east. So when it's vertical, east and west will move with the slider. When it's horizontal, north and south will move with the slider. Another attribute, tick interval, the distance between the ticks. For example, here if I set it to 0.5, you can see here the first value of the tick is -1, the second one is -0.5. The other option we can pass is the resolution. Here the resolution of the TickScale, for example, is equal to 1 for the second scale. or the second tick scale here. If I set it, for example, to 2, you can see that the distance, or I can move the slider by 2. So it's the increment but by which we can move the slider. I set it back to 1. You can also pass the other parameters that you can pass for the scale widget from TTK. The other option we are going to see for the tick scale is the tick position or tick pose. If you have a vertical tick scale, the value can be east or weird or west. So E for east and W for west. This is the east position, E. I'm going to set it to, for example, W, west. Back again. Here I can set it to east and label position to W, which means west. You can see that it worked. For the horizontal tick scale, you can specify north or south position. For example, here, tick position north. You can see here the ticks are above the tick scale and S for south. This is the two values you can use with horizontal tick scale. So the ticks are below the scale. If you do not want to display the ticks, you can set the tick interval to 0. And if you run here the code, you can see that the ticks disappeared. For the styling here, for the vertical tick scale, the slider length was specified. They suggest if you have a problem with the theme, if the slider doesn't display right, you can change the length here. For example, for the second slider, you can see that it doesn't appear completely because the length is equal to I think 20. If I set it to 50, you can see the appearance will change of the slider. Here the font, I think it was set to 20, and we can set it to 10, for example, and we can see that the size of the letters or of the display characters or digits changed. Here the background was changed to white and the foreground to red. For example, if I set it to green, you can see that the ticks and the label are in green. To get the value of the tick scale, you just call the get method of that tick scale. For example, here I added this button, TTK button, that has this command property, a lambda function that will print s1.get, s2.get, and s3.get, s1.get, s1 being the first scale widget, s2 the second one, and s3 the third one. By scale widget, I mean tick scale widget. For example, I'm moving these sliders here for the three widgets, print values, and I see here the values minus 0.14, 2.0, and 0.55. The values correspond. To understand why use this tick scale widgets, I added these two scale widgets, one from the TK library, the second one from the TTK library. Here is the back method. They are both horizontal. They have the same from value 0 and the same maximum value 10. The widget from the TK library can have these parameters: show value to show the label, and tick interval, the intervals for the ticks. But for the TTK scale widget, we cannot have these options. This is the TK scale widget, and this is the TTK scale widget. For the TK widget, we can see that we have the label and the ticks, but from the TTK widget, there is no label and no ticks. Now what I'm going to do is to change the theme of the code. For example, here we are using clam. I'm going to use alt. I will run the code again. You can see the TickScale widget changed. The same for the second one and the third one. Now the sliders and the form of the scale widget is the same as the TTK widget that we added. The difference is that it has no label and no ticks, but the fourth one, it remained the same since it's a TK widget and not TTK, so it is not themed. Now I'm going to change the print values or the command associated with the button to print the values for the fourth and the fifth scale. We can see that they are, or they have the same functions. Now it's difficult to know where to position the slider here. If I call print value, we can see here the value is cannot be specific or cannot be defined precisely when slide. The idea of the TickScale widget is that it combines the features of the two scale widgets from the tkinter library. So you have the ticks and the labels of the TK scale, and you have the theme, the style of the TTK scale widget. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video. Bye.